Hi, I'm Alana Hippensteel from Pharmacy Times. Before we get started, one of our top articles today discusses how frontline healthcare workers have a threefold increased risk of contracting COVID-19 despite use of PPE. There's more of that on pharmacytimes.com. I know CPF has been providing grant opportunities for a lot of important research in the field. What are some examples of some recently completed grants from CPF?
Yeah, so a couple of completed grants that come to mind. We had a really interesting therapeutic grant complete. So that was Dave Dixon out of Virginia. And the topic was ambulatory blood pressure monitoring. And when I was talking to him as the grant was coming through the application and proposal process, he shared that this approach to hypertension management is very common in Europe, and it's conducted in pharmacies and it's conducted in clinics. It's also recommended by the United States Preventative Services Task Force. So it's a recommendation in the United States, but logistically, the ability for clinicians to implement and store the technology and implement the program and have patients coming back is a challenge, and it hasn't had broad uptake in the US. And that's kind of what led him to go down the lines of, well, maybe this is an opportunity for community pharmacy. We see these patients, they're in every month to pick up their blood pressure medications, or every 3 months, and maybe we can do this program. So they collaborated with the clinic and got some referrals from the physicians in this cardiovascular clinic. Patients came in, got the device, took it home, came back, dropped off the device. The pharmacy team interpreted the device and sent back some messaging to the physicians. And it really, it actually over-enrolled and quickly enrolled. It had really great uptake and interest from the patients. And so it's all of the materials actually have their publication already, and it's on our website. All the materials are on our website. And we're looking forward to this grant actually being maybe like an expedited application going forward, because they had such success. And they have a couple other clinics, medical cardiovascular clinics and pharmacies, where they can actually take the same program but expand it to be more under collaborative practice managed treatment. So not only is it just making that first step of monitoring patients and identifying problems, but it's working with the patients and working with the prescribers, all within the pharmacy, within the community pharmacy, to tailor therapy. So we're hopeful for the re-engagement of patient level studies post-COVID, so that we can entertain this application for us sort of for the next phase. And often that's how our CPF grants work, is building block approaches. The board has been more interested in sort of seeing that quick return, that quick demonstration, and looking for the follow-up opportunities, as opposed to sort of big scale multi-year programs, which just generally never tend to go as expected. So our more traditional grants are sort of these little pilot innovator first out of the gate, maybe not real big funding amounts, but they often lead to either new programs, sustained programs, and also are used as catalysts for larger federal funding grants. So we've had some of those in that case too. And so we're actually trying to capture that as far as ongoing impact on the website to highlight some of those successes that have come from our innovative grants.
Excellent, excellent. So I know CPF, actually, let me retake this. How about any recently awarded grants from CPF of note?
Yeah, so recently awarded, I would say we kind of have a couple buckets that have emerged a little differently in the past year. So we've kind of come into this category of partner grants, and instead of being sort of that example of Dave Dixon and the one-off funding and the researchers go and do the project, this is a little more collaborative. So we've had two of note recently, and the first one being the ACT Pharmacy Collaborative. So sort of the home base for that project is the University of Pittsburgh and Melissa McGivney leading that. And that is a partnership with Pitt, the University of Pitt, as well as with AACP, so the colleges of pharmacy, the academicians. And that's looking at the partnership of academia and CPESN pharmacies, so AC, and then Transformation Pharmacy Collaborative, so the ACT Pharmacy Collaborative, which the intent was to bring together academicians in the state, CPESN pharmacies in the state with the intention of unifying, mobilizing, and amplifying. Each group has resources and needs, and when they came together and sort of talked about what those were, there were notes all over the flip charts of the potential opportunities to collaborate and advance each other and help each other out. And even if it's the simplest of a meeting space or a Zoom link, you know, in these days and time, if they weren't connected and didn't know that that opportunity was available for each other, it just didn't happen. So it's brought those two groups together. And interestingly, it also tied in significantly with the Flip the Pharmacy program, because the states where these pharmacies were aiding in resources. They were providing some support for coaching. They were providing services. And so we've really seen a synergy towards the scaling with this program. And they weren't intentional, but it's resulted in a really nice working relationship between all three of those groups, actually, over time. Yeah. The other partner grant is with PQA, and we're looking at bringing together consensus, so stakeholders who are interested in looking at defining ways to measure pharmacy metrics, quality measures a little bit differently for value-based payment. So maybe tapping into some of those clinical measures like blood pressure and A1Cs that are captured in the e-care plans, or other approaches. And so it's meant to be a meeting of the minds to brainstorm about these concepts. But in addition to that, maybe some of these stakeholders would be willing to pilot some of these measures. And this helps get the quality metrics advanced to sort of advance from the claims data, which is accessible and needed. We need to have a uniform platform of measurement, but looking to ways that might be more valuable to payers in these new models that capture the work that pharmacists are doing with patients in those clinical measures and metrics. So those are some of our partner grants. More of our traditional grant we funded in, one example is in New York, David Jacobs, and they're looking at a grant using community health workers. And their panel has met a few times, and they've developed a really great toolkit. We're actually hoping to get some of that information out as while the grant is in progress. But they realized there's the community health workers, and there's also a big component of engaging with the social determinants of health. So it's sort of even expanded in its scope, and it's involving all of those aspects, and they're working to pilot it now in New York as well as Missouri and sort of fine tune that toolkit. But that was just an area kind of unmet need, and area where pharmacists were expanding their reach and scope. And so that's an example of one of our traditional grant funded.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, Anne-Marie. Now let's hear from other MGH Life Sciences brands on their latest headlines.